In Module 4, we'll be looking at building globally distributed databases using Cosmos DB. Chris, what are you going to share with us about this module?
Well, Cosmos DB really is where we can, go into more of the NoSQL solutions. And in this module, we have 4 lessons. You might start to see a theme, a recurring theme appearing now, because in lesson 1, we're going to create an Azure Cosmos DB built to scale. So, one of the exam requirements is that you should know how to provision these services.
Yep.
And then in lesson 2, we're going to look at how we can insert and query data in Azure Cosmos DB database.
Yep.
And then we took the decision to take content that showed how an application can interact with that. Now, I do acknowledge that there may be some of your students that don't know .NET, okay? We don't want you to be an expert in .NET at all. It was just really to show the art of the possible. So in lesson 3, build a .NET Core app for Azure Cosmos DB in Visual Studio Code. To be honest, they're not thinking about typing up code. They're replaying it really, just to show an example.
Are we covering anything around APIs and so on as well?
Yeah, that's in lesson 1. So, we need to understand that there's different models that are available to the Azure Cosmos DB. And in lesson 4, the other key selling point of this, of course, is planetary scale, right? So in lesson 4, we're going to look at how you can distribute that data globally. So I would say from an exam perspective, lesson 1 and lesson 4 are really important, followed by lesson 2. Lesson 3 isn't on the exam at all, but it provides that real world edge that you'd be looking for.
And really, when I think about this as like additional prep, I know we did significant investment in building out a set of Cosmos DB assets on Learn as well, where you could go and have additional, it's really good content.
I'll be honest with you, isn't there about 8-9 hours of that content on there? There's way more on Learn than there is in here, just simply because of timing, right? So, you're right, Dandy. I would actively encourage you to look at the assets on Learn to supplement the work that you're doing.
Any takeaways from the lessons that we have for this module? Or
the key takeaways is it depends. Do you want the takeaways from a certification perspective or from a real world perspective?
From like, hey, how do you redeliver this?
Yeah, sure. And what I'll do is I'll go through this as we go through each lesson. It'll make it easier. So, creating Azure Cosmos DB built to scale, right? So you mentioned, do we understand about APIs and so forth?
Yeah.
We talk about it all here. So by the end of this lesson, you should understand what Cosmos DB is, how you create it. Really important that you understand request units.
Yeah.
It's really
partitioning
important.
As well.
Exactly. And the skills that you know about partitioning from SQL, they apply here as terms of background knowledge. And then how to create a database and a collection. So really by the end of this lesson, you understand all the background to Cosmos DB, you know how to provision it, you know how to create a database within it and a collection.
Okay. Then the programming models goes into the, we understand the what is, focus on scale, performance, availability. Programming models goes into the APIs?
Yeah, so what you need to clearly articulate is that within Azure Cosmos DB, it can support a number of different APIs, right? Now, we know that a lot of people are starting to learn this, so we've chosen to focus primarily on SQL as an API, because we know that will be in a lot of people's comfort zones. We do have a couple of pages about the Graph API, but we're not going into MongoDB, Cassandra.
Which we actually have covered in our migration course.
Perfect.
Driving those migrations over to Cosmos DB.
So that was the key decision point of not including them in this course because we've got courses coming out around them. So again, if you see a screenshot, you probably want to demo this. You'll get into a routine after your first couple of teachers of opening up the portal, going into the relevant technology, showing them how to provision it. Request units, important aspect because it handles the volume of transactions that you need. The bottom point's really important, right? So exceeding throughput limits there. It's really important to stress that basically that your request will be rate limited. Now, what you're putting across to the students there is it's really important that you think about the volumes of data that's coming through and how you've got to handle that so you choose the appropriate request unit.
Focus on scale.
Partitioning, again, important. because it can be used to effectively load data.
And so really, if you dare understand the concepts around how partitioning works, it's very easy to transfer that skills towards Cosmos DB.
Exactly, because partitioning is partitioning.
Yep.
It divides your data into logical divisions, right? So again, we've got best practices there, right?
Yep.
You know, range of values. The more values you have, the more scalability you'll have. Review your queries. Things change. You know, the queries that were relevant today are not necessarily relevant tomorrow.
Perfect.
And of course, the transactional workloads. Occasionally, you'll get heavy workloads, so you need to understand how you manage that as well. So partitioning is critical to understand in terms of ensuring that the performance is met as well. And then how to add a collection with a database. Yeah, perfect. Again, it's a screenshot, so go in and demo it, I would recommend. We have our review questions, and then we move on to lesson 2. Here, inserting and querying data in your Azure Cosmos DB, and we've got 4 key objectives here. We're going to actually create a product catalog document using what's called Data Explorer, perform queries against Azure Cosmos DB, run complex operations, and then, as I mentioned, look at an example of something that's different to SQL API with the Graph API. So really, again, I think what you're going to do in this module, quite frankly, particularly in the first 2 lessons, is have the portal open, create the Cosmos database, create the collection, and then in this case, show them an example of how you can create the product catalog document using Data Explorer, right? And it's relatively straightforward. Again, I encourage you to always do the lab. This is going to be new to a lot of students, and they're probably going to need hand-holding. So don't be afraid to actually do some of this stuff as well. Again, with performing queries, we just give examples. We hope your students are comfortable with this already. We've deliberately not made it complicated. And running complex operations on data. Think about encapsulation, right? How do we do that? Store procedures or user-defined functions. These are objects that are supported in Cosmos DB. The labs get you doing this. So you will do this in the labs, right? Everything that you see here, you're going to do. Working with graph data. We don't do this in the lab, but it's to give you an example that using Python, we can actually insert data. So here we've got information about the various national parks in the California area and how we can work with that to create what's called vertices and edges.
Makes sense.
Going through the review questions, we move on to lesson 3. Again, this is not really pertinent to the certification. It's more a real-world add-on. It also gave me the opportunity, I don't mind admitting, of working with one of my favourite tools of the last 12 months, which is Visual Studio Code. I absolutely love it. And, you know, the more people that use it, the more people are finding that it's becoming very, very useful, particularly in the world of data science as well, because of the way that it handles that. In this lesson, it does repeat creation of the Cosmos DB account database collection, but it's being done in Visual Studio Code with an Azure Cosmos DB extension. So here's a really good example to give some love to the developers in your room and go, hey, you know, I've been talking about this through the portal, but here's an example of how you would use it, because we've seen a lot of traction with developers using Cosmos DB. And then they'll create an application to store and query that data, use a terminal in Visual Studio Code to create a console application, and then use the functionality to use the Azure Cosmos DB extension in Visual Studio Code to interact with that. Really gives you a good opportunity to really, you know, see a real application in action itself. I would recommend here, gauge it with your group. At the end of the day, I think out of every lesson in the entire course, this for your attendees may be the most complicated, especially if they've not been developers. So, you know, you may choose to, you know, just really show them the high levels about this, how they can work with the documents programmatically with the various methods outlined on the slide here, and then we provide an example, okay? How do you perform Azure Cosmos DB queries? Well, again, you can use the Explorer to do that. In Visual Studio Code, you can also create your documents as well. Review questions.
Yep, perfect.
Final module, really important, especially from a certification objective.
Yep.
Yeah, it is in some respects, because this is the key selling point, right? And you know, I've worked on projects with Azure Cosmos DB with global customers when I was in the AI engineering team. And if you want millisecond response time around the globe anywhere, this is the technology to use, right? Even with your SQL queries. So 4 objectives, and what you're going to do is learn the benefits of writing and replicating data, and then specifically talk about Cosmos DB multi-master replication, failover management, and the final lesson is the consistency mindset.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I've done this in the form of screenshots because I just like the way it looks in the portal, right? You just click on the relevant area where you want to replicate your data to, and you can choose whether it's read enabled or write enabled. And we go into that in a little bit more depth with multi-master replication. This is a build slide, so it'll talk about how it will replicate content in a multi-master replication where anyone who's familiar with Active Directory replication will be kind of familiar with that multi-master model. And then considerations for failover management. Now, you do have automatic failover. That is a feature. And then you've got to consider the configuration of how you've set up the different replications. So you might have a read region that goes out, in which case the read region in one of the affected areas is automatically disconnected from the write region and marked offline. But if you've got a situation where it's a write region and that has an outage, and automatic failover is enabled, basically the region will be automatically marked offline, and then an alternative region is promoted as a write region. So you do need to know this stuff, particularly for the exam as well. Consistency levels with Cosmos DB, another build slide. You need to know this. If you're familiar with consistency levels in SQL, it's the same principle, right? You're balancing concurrency with consistency. So strong in Cosmos DB is about consistency of the data, and that consistency is reduced as you make your way through what's called eventual. And eventual is where the focus is on most concurrent access. Okay, review questions. Here you're looking at the capabilities of Azure Cosmos DB to meet the 4 objectives. This is definitely a one-to-one mapping with the topics. What they're going to do here is use the lab scenario to go a little bit more in depth with regards to the case study.
Makes sense.
And then they will create the Cosmos DB in the portal. They'll use the Data Explorer to insert and query data there. They'll then use the building a .NET Core app. It is a copy and paste lab. I don't mind admitting this. The prerequisite is not to be a developer.
And it makes sense at the associate level cert.
Exactly. Totally. But they are copying and pasting chunks that are specific to the functionality that's being done. And then distributing the data globally with the Azure Cosmos DB. Okay. Open questions for the lab review as usual, where you can start to get conversations going about where they might use this, are they going to use it, and so forth. And then finally, there is a module review that gives you the opportunity to go through each of these. I highly recommend, on top of the materials on Learn,
white papers.
Rima's team have done an amazing job with the white papers for Cosmos DB, and I would highly recommend that you go there.
Yeah, that's a really good point of pointing out those white papers.
Yeah, excellent. So that's how we can build planetary scale applications using Azure Cosmos DB.
Perfect.
Shall we go on to the next module?
Sounds fair.
Let's do that.
Thanks, everyone.